really excited to have you here because we don't have guests. It's really difficult to get here.
That's what I like. I love the long journeys. You built this home yourselves. Some of the best views that I've ever woken up to. Lucía, she's a coffee processing specialist who came from a wine background in California. You came from Cleveland, Ohio,
Yes.
to this beautiful mountain. What inspired that move for the two of you? Thank you for brewing this, Nick. It's really tasty. This is a koji fermentation.
Yes.
Super natural. So tell us a little bit about the koji fermentation.
Oh, I'm not the expert on this processing, but I think the reason why it's called a supernatural is because they applied the koji yeast on the cherries. So it's a natural process, but it is a supernatural process because of this selected yeast that they decided.
The koji yeast. And what's koji typically used for?
Rice. So it's like a rice fermentation in Japan.
In Japan, right? For making like a sauce or just making, what do they do with it?
I think they do tempeh, and I think they also sometimes do the rice fermentation and the bean fermentation. But this is like a whole new unexplored. Like I do yeast for wine, but Japanese yeasts are a whole new world.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to become a lot more common in specialty coffee to try these types of fermentation. So I think even though right now it's like very niche, I think it's going to become a lot more common, a little bit more mainstream.
Yeah. Well, we've seen a lot of non-mainstream things here on the farm. Lucía, Nick, thank you for inviting me to your beautiful home. Some of the best views that I've ever woken up to. You built this home yourselves within the last 2 years over the pandemic. You built a beautiful family of these 2 dogs and a small kitten. I'm really excited to hear about your journey, help you to share your story a little bit with some of the folks on the other side. For everyone who is watching, you may have seen an interview that I've done with Lucía. She's a coffee processing specialist who came from a wine background in California. So if you haven't seen that video, we talked all about different things, including the illustrious anaerobic fermentation. So if you want to watch that, there's a link up here. But in the meantime, I want to focus more on what you're doing here. You made your way to Colombia less than 2 years ago. I want to hear about that journey. You came from Cleveland, Ohio,
Yes.
to this beautiful mountain. Very different setting, different environment. But why don't you share, what inspired that move for the two of you?
Well, I think the first thing is we're really excited to have you here because we don't have guests. Like if people have seen any of the other things that you've shared on social media, it's really difficult to get here. Not just Colombia is pretty far, and our farm here is even further, and then our house on the farm is just even more. So it's all these barriers to get here. So it's really nice to have somebody to share a house with. So I think you kind of make it seem like we had a plan, which we didn't really have a plan. Our only plan was to leave the United States. Our only plan was we spent 2019 being stuck in Ohio in our homes, like many people, and felt like we really needed to get out. And so my work is to visit coffee farms a week at a time. And we realized that model, post-COVID, post-pandemic world, was not going to work for me to keep traveling as much as I was traveling. Mm-hmm. So we were looking for a place where we could spend a little bit more time. So we were looking to do 3 months at a time instead of 1 week at a time. So this original contract was for 1 week. And then because of the pandemic, we had to keep postponing. And by the time it came that Colombia had opened its borders, we thought, well, why don't we go for 3 months? Because that's kind of a normal tourist visa, and let's see what we do. But we weren't planning on going back to the States. We thought, well, maybe we'll just keep doing 3-month stays at different farms. My family's from Guatemala. I can go stay with them if something doesn't work out. And we just came here, and within the first 2 weeks, we're like, why would we leave? So after the first 3 months, we renewed for another 3 months because we can do that as tourists at extension. And we got along with the owner really well, and there was just a lot of work to do here. So then we started working for the company, and our visa was through work. And then this opportunity there was an existing house on this lot that was completely falling apart and just kind of unsafe and very neglected. And so the owner said, well, why don't you build your house here? And Nick and I just love design. We love that kind of of work. And so we kind of had a little picture in our minds, and we worked with an architect to kind of turn our scribbles on the iPad into this reality. 1 week became 3 months, that became 6 months, that became a year, and now we're here a year and a half. And so there just doesn't seem to be, again, there wasn't no master plan. We just kind of kept saying yes to whatever the moment was bringing up, and it's brought us here. And now, as you mentioned, we have our pups, and so we kind of see ourselves staying here till they die. Like,
10 to 15 years.
10 to 15 years.
And they're still quite young, so.
Yes, they're very young. We got very, like, 2-year-old pups. So
We've got Coco here. He's the energetic one, maybe. Luna, she's the dominant, she's the matriarch.
I think of her as like the big sister who's like very cautious and like not that friendly, and Coco's just like the rambunctious little brother who's like all up in everybody's business. Her name before we got her was Shakira.
Oh, really?
Every now and then she'll like, we didn't know until some of the other like coffee workers saw her and they're like, Shakira, and she was like,
Oh,
and I was like, you know her?
great Colombian name.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about when you started the construction on this house, like what inspired the certain aspects of it. What was here before? I think this is all very recent. You finished in like October, November last year, right?
Yeah. When we got here, there was another house here. It was very much a shack. And the employees that were living here moved to a different location on the farm.
Mhm.
So in about 24 hours, they had taken the shack down. And then we started the design process with the architect. I mean, we've been thinking about our living space for a long time because we lived in a very small apartment when we were in Ohio. And after living in such a small space, we knew we didn't need anything much larger than that.
Yeah.
So it was all about utilizing as much as the space as we could. So every area has a function in the house. So we wanted something to be very small and comfortable for us. Like it was completely designed with us in mind, not with anybody else. Like it wasn't.
Not even visitors. Like we're like,
Nothing.
our family's not going to come visit us. Their friends are not going to come visit us.
Like,
Like we
what-
don't need to make extra bedrooms and.
What do we want? What do we need? How do we function in a space? So we've had like multi-use rooms. So there's a desk
Yeah.
built into the couch. Like all of these things are built to utilize everything very, very well.
I love that aspect.
It's
Yeah.
efficiency.
It is very efficient, for sure. But yeah, that's one thing I also wanted to ask. Now that you have everything, obviously it's a work in progress. I think you're never gonna necessarily finish the project because I grew up constantly in construction. I know how it is. But I'm curious what a typical day in the life, what typical day in the life on the mountain. We're at 2,000 meters above sea level here. It's amazing. I love it. Amazing views. Great garden, which you built from scratch, obviously. So like, what do you typically get up to?
A lot of our time is spent gardening. Yeah, I mean, we wake up, we have our coffee, we enjoy the views.
Well, I would say the weather really dictates what we
Yeah.
do. It's sort of like if we wake up and it's sunny, it's like laundry time to clean up, like take the dog beds out and do stuff like that. If it's rainy, like it's most of the time, then we decide to do computer work. And so we really live by the weather, just to say, what is it like outside and then what are we going to do? So I think it's tough to say there's a typical day because it will really change. But most of the time, we look at that. What computer work do we need to do? We try to get that out of the way.
Record a podcast,
Read
things
some
like
books.
that.
And then most of the time, like a really good day for us is days where we can spend just out in the garden. So
Right.
we'll get our gardening equipment and just spend hours outside. And that's like what we try to do. And then Nick spends a lot of time cooking because it's our only way to have food up here. So
Great cook. Been enjoying it the last few days. And one of the things that's been taking up a lot of your time as well, we mentioned the podcast. You may know that she has a podcast, Making Coffee, with
it's really going
Lucía
off the deep
Solis.
end. It's really for people that are coffee enthusiasts to like the nth degree of really looking at processing things and looking at different microbiology like aspects of coffee processing. So it's not for the faint-hearted who are just dabbling in coffee.
Yeah. So it's not just making coffee on your countertop, which we do a lot of, but every single step along the way, from harvesting, mostly processing. We were talking about the koji fermentation earlier.
Drying, which is
Drying.
hard to make interesting.
Yeah.
You know, watching like grass grow, but
But we usually throw some dogs in there and it becomes a little bit more fun.
can you
Right in the frame.
From the podcast, I really wanted to talk about the Discord channel that you have happening between you and producers and roasters.
Yeah, so I decided to, as part of the community, like I realized that people that listen to the podcast are very committed and very enthusiastic. And usually it's mostly producers, because the podcast was meant for coffee producers to kind of be able to navigate all of the different processing techniques and just a lot of the different protocols that that roasters are asking for: anaerobic process, carbonic maceration, lactic process, things like that, supernaturals, and to give them a bit of a context and a roadmap. And so when I started to hear feedback from the people that listen to the podcast, I just thought, these people are so cool. I wish there was a way for them to talk to each other and not just talk to me, and not just for me to hear from them. So on Discord, we started a live office hours, so I'm able to go on there a couple times a month and just kind of open up the floor to people's questions. But what's been really cool is seeing people interact with each other. So a lot of roasters are connecting directly with producers that are interested in these processes, and then a lot of producers who may have been very hesitant or not really known how to navigate social media and like connect directly with buyers are able to, in a very organic way, make a personal connection to say, oh, there's this buyer in Boston, there's this buyer in Europe, and now they're able to kind of present themselves without that barrier. So that's been really great. So I really encourage people that want to talk to producers directly, or that want to, or maybe roasters that are looking to make those connections, or producers that want to learn from each other. A lot of times, because producers live in such remote places, it's really difficult to share your experiences and learn from others' mistakes. Like, that's a really easy way to be like, oh, I tried that, it didn't work, maybe don't waste your time, or this is my experience with that piece of equipment. So producers to be able to go online and have this place to just share, kind of almost like reviews. Like, I bought that equipment and this is what worked, or this is what didn't work.
Cool. Yeah, and you also do like live sort of chats, or like, you know, hangouts. Yeah, so by video.
Those are the office hours that I'm able to, a lot of the times what's really fun about it is like troubleshooting. So a producer will try a process and they'll say, you know, I tried it and it didn't work and I don't know why. And so I can kind of go and investigate and say, okay, well, let's talk about how you harvested. Let's talk about your temperature during fermentation. Tell me how you dried the coffee. Tell me what the flavor notes were like. And then we can kind of like, you know, be a detective backwards and say, well, this is maybe the critical points where you can try something different. So it's just like workshopping some processes that may have not worked well, or trying to figure out what worked well, and then they just are kind of nervous to say, like, well, I don't know how to do that again. Like, I'm not sure what kind of magic all went together.
If there are any producers, roasters watching, or people who might want to get involved, what's the easiest way? If I can put a link down in the description.
So I think the easiest way would be to go to my website, and we'll have that link, lucia.coffee, and then you can see how to join the Discord channel.
So I'll put a specific link down there. So if that's something that's interesting to you, getting together and learning from some other people, getting inspired, troubleshooting, bringing opportunities and challenges, I think it's a great way to get some feedback and like bounce off of each other. The coffee community is growing, but it's still very connected, especially here in Colombia. I've noticed everyone seems to know each other, often support each other. So should we head to town? It's a very, very beautiful day by off chance, and I think we want to go and get some snacks. So we decided to take a quick muddy trip into town. Their house is way up there, but this is a nice little trail, sort of a shortcut to where we're gonna get picked up at the mill down here. And this actually used to be the path that Nick and Lucia used to take every single day on their way.
Twice a day.
Oh, twice a day.
Twice a day.
We are literally surrounded, not right here, this is more of a pasture, but down there there's coffee plants, coffee cherries, coffee hills, and dogs. Coffee dogs. So here we decided to hitch a ride in Don Javier's truck. Very, very practical for getting down these coffee roads. As you can tell, there are coffee plants all around us, all up the mountain. And amazing, amazing views. I don't know if you can see those birds above us. Nick, do you know what those birds are? Condors. Condors.